I'm not sure what they sang in Hong Kong and Ghana and other countries. Who was old enough to, as a child, sing God Save the King? Who sang God Save the King? Look at that. Hands down. That's saying something, isn't it? See, I've never, as an Australian, I've never had a king. I've only had the Queen. And so I've never been the subject of an earthly king. This Easter, our focus is on King Jesus. And we want to talk about that. But the hard thing is, I think for us, that king is a pretty remote concept. I don't think we think about it that often. The closest I've been to a queen is when Sharon and I were backpacking around Europe. We were walking through Amsterdam, through the main square there, and this woman with this small security detail walked past, and we said to somebody, "Who's that?" because she looked important. They said, "That's Queen Beatrix." That's the closest I've ever gotten to royalty. So I don't think it actually means that much to us. I don't know how often you think about Queen Elizabeth. I imagine it's not. Maybe it is, I don't know. I wouldn't want to guess on your behalf. So this concept of a king, I think it doesn't kind of impact our lives, but it did mean something in the first century. It was a title that meant something. To say you were a king was to say something about your power and what you could and could not do and who you were in the world. Now, if you've read the Gospels a lot, you'll know that they kind of talk about Jesus in different ways, and that the Gospel writers want us to understand different aspects of who Jesus was. So if you've read Luke's Gospel a lot, you'll know that Luke is the one who's the most inclusive Gospel. So it's what we might call the most social Gospel. It names the most people, names the most non-Jews, names the most women. If you've read Matthew's Gospel, you'll know that all the way through it, it quotes the Old Testament. So Matthew wants us to understand that Jesus Christ is the fulfilment of the Old Testament. And if you've read Mark, you'll know that this is a gospel that presents Jesus as the one who will suffer on our behalf. And that's a theme of what it takes to follow Jesus and to suffer with him. But for John, the gospel that we're using this Easter, he wants us to understand that Jesus is king and that means something. Now, while I say that in the first century they understood it better than we do now, I think, I'm not sure that the disciples understood his kingship. I don't know if you noticed that verse on the way through. At first, his disciples didn't understand all this. Well, that was really kind of the theme of their discipleship, that they didn't understand all this. They struggled to understand who Jesus was, and I'm kind of with them. There's this verse in Hebrews which I think really kind of describes my understanding of Jesus. And the writer in Hebrews says, "You are spiritually dull and slow to learn." And I think we can feel like that sometimes. It kind of really describes my whole schooling experience. Although sometimes you can think you have the right answer. I don't know if they do this in primary schools anymore, because when I was a kid singing God Save the Queen in primary school, we sat in 2 rows behind wooden desks that still had inkwells in them, and with fold-up tops, and we were told where to sit. And but I remember one day we'd been learning about American geography, and I don't know why, and that doesn't stay with me. And we'd been studying the state of Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. And our teacher had explained the background to both those terms. Philadelphia, which means brotherly love. And Pennsylvania, a guy called William Penn, and Sylvan means trees, so it means Penn's forest. Anyway, the teacher asked us this for an answer, and I knew it. Sir, I don't know if this is a bit I don't know if they do anymore in these sort of more egalitarian types of classrooms, but I sat up straight, sir, I know, sir. I was the only one who remembered. Nobody else was putting their hand up. Oh, I was so proud. Sir. I really wanted to answer this question. And he had a sense of drama and theatre, this teacher, I think. He wanted to drive home to the rest of the class that they had not been listening. So he said, "What does Philadelphia mean?" "Sir, sir, sir." And then he said, "Yes, Grant." And I said, "Trees." And I got it wrong. That's why the memory stayed with me. Have you ever had one of those moments where you got it horribly wrong? The disciples didn't understand. All the time they were putting their hands up saying, "Sir, Jesus, this is what it means, sir." That's what Lord means, by the way. Sir, sir, sir. And they got it wrong all the time. But it's not really their fault, I think, because we misunderstand Jesus still. We often just take one part of who he is. And we say, he's my friend, or he's my forgiver, or he's my guide. But Jesus is our King, and that means something special. He's our Lord, and he calls us to follow him, and he says, "Be like me." And so they struggled with this. So Jesus spent a lot of time explaining his kingdom, the fact that his kingdom was a spiritual kingdom lived out in a physical world, that his kingdom had no geographical borders, but it was about hearts and behaviours and attitudes. And you could identify its citizens, even if you didn't know where the border was. And all that meant that Jesus was a strange kind of king. You see, he had no political power. He had no army. He wrote no manifesto. He had no PR team. No entourage. What he had was spiritual and personal authority, and everybody recognised that. But he was backed by no institution, no government, although, of course, we know who his father is. So he was a confusing king. And lots of people were there that day, waving their palm branches because of the miracle, the sign, as John called it, that he performed. It tells us that was the reason that so many went out to meet him. He was a miracle worker. But that was kind of confusing too, because the miracle worker then asked for a donkey, or found a donkey to sit on. He raised the dead and rode a donkey. He stilled the storm, but said, "I'm a servant." And he told his followers that they too must be servants, slaves to all, he said. And we still don't get that, I think. It's the hardest part of the Christian story, to get into us, to get into our hearts. I've noticed that in me, this, and you might know this struggle as well. Like, we truly want to serve. But somehow we need people to thank us for it. And we try and be altruistic, and 100% it's all about others, but does anybody drive north when they go home from here in heavy traffic sometimes, and you make that double lane turn from Victoria Avenue into Church Street, and it goes into one lane, and all those people who've changed out of that left-hand lane drive to the front and want to cut in? How do you feel about that? Well, sometimes I try and be generous. And I pull back a little and I allow that person to come in. And you know what? Sometimes they don't even say thank you. And that's a kind of a common human thing, isn't it? We want to say, well, I'm a generous person. Yeah, I'll let you in. What? You didn't even thank me? You see, it's hard to be like our King, I think. It's hard to be a good citizen. We're not so good at miracles and donkey riding together. We're either filled with pride or filled with self-doubt. And it's hard to get the balance right for us, I think. It's hard to balance being the child of the King and a servant of the King at the same time. And this is one of the reasons that Jesus disturbs us. When we look at who he was and what he did, he's divided opinions ever since he walked the earth. The whole world is going after him, the Pharisees said. The whole world is going after him. But when they looked at Jesus, they wanted to kill him. Some people still do. doesn't suit them, the Jesus they see. Now, I don't know if any of you have studied sociology, but if you have, there's a thing called social group theory that explains how humans interact with each other and our need to be together and what all of that means. And one of the interesting things about social group theory is the way we choose leaders. We choose leaders who are like us, or like what we think we are, or like what we want to be. And they call it the prototypical leader. It's not the prototype because it's a practice model. It's the first model, a premium model. So people, when they choose leaders, they want to choose someone who represents the values that are dear to them. And if you notice the American election, you'll notice that that's what happened. It's actually got nothing to do with people's skill sets. It's got nothing to do with our logic and with our reason. And this happens in human groups, from picking your captain when you're in the under-8 softball team, to choosing the leader of the Salvation Army, to choosing a president. See, we want our leaders, we want our kings to be like us. We want our earthly kings to be like us. But our king says, no, you must be like me. You must be like me. And so the Pharisees said, no, that won't do. Not that Jesus, not that king. That won't suit us. And so this unusual, confusing king who's just raised a man from the dead hops on an undignified donkey for a hero's welcome that will lead to his death. That story doesn't make sense. The king who's just raised a man from the dead hops on an undignified donkey for a hero's welcome that will lead to his death. See, Jesus defied their typecasting as he rode into Jerusalem. And he still does today, I think. We have to recognise the mystery in the whole Easter story. When I was a kid, when I first started to take it as my own, I think the thing that puzzled me was why? Why? I loved Jesus. I'd grown up loving Jesus, knowing that Jesus loved me. Then I read a story where he died. And I said to God, why? Why was the crowd so fickle? Why were the Pharisees so angry? Why were the Roman rulers so powerless? Why this death? Why this agony? Why this desolation? Why such forgiveness? Why, my King, would you choose to die in agony for me? And perhaps at the end of the day, we must all fall to our knees and acknowledge that our King is more than we can understand. That is the mystery of Easter. Amazing love. How can it be that thou, my God, shouldst die for me? And so this week we will remember Easter, not to understand it, but to remind each other that this Easter story is our story, that our King knows our names. And here's the thing, he's a courteous King. Our King invites us to join him. He waits on us. He stands at the door of our hearts and he knocks, waiting for our yes. And perhaps what will matter most this Easter is that we say, yes, you are my King. And we say that with pride and with humility and with wonder. We remember that Jesus is the King who stoops to conquer, who comes down to us, who helps us lift our eyes from our sin and weakness, helps us see glorious possibilities in our lives and in the lives of others. He is the paradoxical, extraordinary, humble, almighty King who loves you and loves me. He is the King who raises us up to hope, to dream and to imagine and to live in his great love. May you and I this Easter say, he's my King. May we say it with pride and humility and wonder.